forensic experts know that not all serial killers are etymologically correct to call the word maniac. It is correct to refer to maniacs only those for whom killing became an end in itself, mania that brings pleasure incomprehensible to a healthy psyche. In modern Russia, about people go missing every year, including children. They are not found. Listen to a documentary story about an Omsk pervert to know the psychological profile of a criminal. Perhaps someday it will help save someone's life. Petr Gerankov is a criminal who gladly killed 10 people. He did not kill the owners of valuable property, did not engage in sexual violence or necrophilia. In other words, he just liked to kill, and not to perform any other actions with a living victim or her dead body. In addition to this insufficient motivation of this maniac, who was operating in the city of Omsk in the mid-90s, the sample of his victims in combination with the method of murder is striking. All those killed are elderly people. The killer each time penetrated to the victims in their home and committed murder with an axe. And of course, all people who are in the slightest degree familiar with the classics of Russian literature recognize in these actions the plot of Dostoevsky's novel Crime and Punishment, whose hero, Rodion Raskolnikov, also used an axe and killed the old woman in her house. But it is still unclear how Gerankov himself felt about his literary prototype. However, the media quickly dubbed him Raskolnikov from Omsk. Petr Evgenievich Gerankov is a native of one of the villages of the Kokchetav region. He was born in 1965. After graduating from secondary school, the guy almost immediately sat down on the dock, and not for anything, but for murder with motives of robbery. Since the killer was young and this was his first walker, he was released relatively quickly, and soon went to jail for the second time. The article is a robbery, which by some happy coincidence did not become a murder. True, little is known about the details of those old cases, since the cases were clearly mediocre. It is also not known how it happened that when Pyotr Gerankov was released after 2 terms, he was already married and had a child with his wife. The only thing that is clear is that they had nowhere to live, and for nothing, the young parents clearly did not strive for honest work. They settled in a rented apartment in the small town of Sergeevka in Kazakhstan. Soon they ran out of money to rent a dwelling and they wondered what to do next. In principle, they had a variant of resettlement, but for this it was necessary to overcome the path from Kazakhstan to Omsk, where Lyudmila Gerankova had hospitable relatives. Peter began to demand money for the road from an elderly landlady from whom they rented an apartment in Sergeevka. The pensioner of course refused, after which the tenant and his wife came to her house. Then the first murder, characteristic of Gerankov, was committed, with an axe. When the deed was done, the couple ransacked the apartment, finding a small amount of money, and decided to cover up the traces of the crime by starting a fire with an electric heater. However, neighbors were found who put out the fire in time, and it became clear that the lonely old woman was killed, and not killed in the fire. But then no one thought about the former tenants. Having moved to Omsk and settled with relatives in 1995, the spouses again faced the money issue. Then Pyotr Gerankov decided to act according to a well-established tactic. He began to learn about lonely pensioners renting out their homes. Allegedly under the pretext of looking for housing, he spoke to the old woman, who wrote him the address where he could rent a room. The next day, Peter came to visit the old woman with his wife and with a hammer prepared for the case. This time, Lyudmila herself delivered blows. The poor old woman turned out to be not so poor. She had about 1,000,000 rubles, which she obviously saved for a long time. But the spouses in excitement still grabbed not only this money, but also simple worn clothes, boots, military medals and even food from the refrigerator. Of course, this murder was not the last. Peter and Lyudmila went to work together a couple of times, but the main part of the problem, as expected, was solved by the husband. However, after another crime, a disagreement arose between the spouses, and Pyotr Gerankov continued to act alone. Moreover, his handwriting has changed. He did not always find a way, or simply did not want to. To enter the house of another old man, they committed murders right on the street, in poorly populated areas. Yes, and loot in the form of valuables interested him less and less. He, of course, robbed the killed, but he was quite enough meager sums of pocket money, canned stew or jars of jam. One got the impression that he killed for the sake of the murder process itself. And the last man he killed was not even an old man yet, that is, he was not included in Gerankov's target audience. But even this random drinking companion paid with his life for inviting the murderer into the house out of the kindness of his soul and staying to drink with him. Life imprisonment or death penalty. Of course, law enforcement agencies tracked a series of similar murders that occurred within 6 months, from March to October 1995. In total, 9 people were killed then, and considering the murder for which Pyotr Gerankov was still in his youth, it turns out that in his entire life he killed 10 people. He was detained 12 days after the last crime. During the investigation, the Gerankovs changed their testimony. Petr himself confessed to everything that was perfect, but argued that his wife did not know about his deeds and should not be considered an accomplice. But 2 months have passed, during which the spouse has never visited her husband, who is in the isolation ward, perhaps, believing that she will be able to escape both responsibility and from the faithful, and a lot of offended Gerankov gave the investigation all the episodes of her complicity. As a result, Lyudmila Gerankova was also convicted and received 5 years in prison and confiscation of property. But the death penalty was the sentence to Pyotr Gerankov. But then the story becomes mysterious again, since in 1996 in the Russian Federation a moratorium on the death penalty was just passed. And it is not known whether they managed to bring the verdict to Gerankov into action. According to some reports, the maniac was executed in Yekaterinburg in 1996. According to others, to this day he is still alive and is on life imprisonment in the colony of strict regime, White Swan. In any case, there is no official date of death in his biography yet. In general, because of people like the Gerankovs, it is necessary to change the criminal code. What do you, viewers of our channel, think about this? Write in the comments. And also do not forget to share this video on your social networks, press the subscribe button and the bell for notifications about new films. Please move on to other videos that you currently see in the end screens.